Good morning, brothers, sisters, and siblings in the struggle. Welcome to another edition of CWA Our Power Radio Show, where we lift up the leaders, the laborers, and the legends who have paved the way for justice on the job and dignity in our communities. Right here on KYOK 1140 AM and the all-new 106.5 FM. If you are visiting the beautiful city of Houston, you can take us home with you on kyokradio.org. Listen and subscribe to us every Thursday morning, 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, right here on kyokradio.org, on the CWA Strong app, or your favorite podcast player, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, iHeartRadio, Podchaser. Search for CWA Hour of Power on your favorite podcast player. The CWA Human Rights Relief Drive is still in effect. St. Louis tornado response. We are collecting urgently needed items to support families affected by the recent tornadoes in St. Louis. The donation has been extended to June 30th. Ship your donations to CWA Local 6300 2258 Grissom Drive, St. Louis, Missouri 63146. Let me repeat that one more time. Ship your donations to CWA Local 6300 2258 Grissom Drive, St. Louis, Missouri 63146. Those items that are in need are toiletries, feminine hygiene products, diapers, baby wipes. These essential items are often overlooked in disaster relief. Let's show our union strength and community support. For a contact, you may contact local President Floyd Bell at 314-991-0200. Again, Floyd Bell, 314-991-0200. Thank you for joining us on the CWA Human Rights Our Power Radio Show. It's about us. That's right. It's about us. Working agreement, solidarity, living wages, worker power, and simply human rights. We have a phenomenal show lined up with you. Micaiah Jones is traveling somewhere. Sir Reginald Small is in the office. Timmia Wiley is in her seat. And Tay is out and about as well. So don't you dare change that dial. Our union voices are ringing in every district, from Alaska to Maine, Texas to Minnesota, Canada to Puerto Rico, because we don't play at CWA. Our union brothers, sisters, and siblings at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette have been outside for 32 months striking on the picket lines. And yet while they are striking, they are still churning out the news with facts for you and me. Let's show our support to them by making sure we subscribe to unionprogress.com. Once you subscribe to this free publication, how about going over and donating to their strike fund at cwa.org/ppg-donate. As we bring Pride Month to a close, we pause to honor not just the rainbow flags or parades, but the people whose courage carved out space for generations to live more freely. Among them stands a giant by the name of Harvey Milk, the first openly gay elected official in California and one of the most fearless human rights activists of the 20th century. Harvey Milk was born in 1930 in Woodmere, New York. He served in the U.S. Navy during the Korean War and for years kept his sexuality a secret in a society that criminalized and condemned LGBTQIA plus people. But by the early 1970s, Milk had moved to San Francisco, where he not only came out proudly, but stepped into public life as an openly gay man determined to shake the system from the ground up. Milk opened a camera shop in the Castro district, but that shop became more than a business. It became a community hub, a place where people could feel seen, safe, and heard. He ran for office multiple times, each campaign building momentum until he was elected to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors in 1977. But Milk's mission was never just about visibility, it was about justice. He fought to pass a sweeping gay rights ordinance in San Francisco, protecting LGBTQIA plus people from discrimination in housing and employment. He opposed bigotry in all forms, standing up against the infamous Briggs Initiative, which would have banned gay and lesbian teachers from public schools. He united laborers, seniors, immigrants, disabled communities, and union leaders around a shared vision of equity. Milk knew that solidarity was a force more powerful than hate. He partnered with labor champions like Cesar Chavez, and he supported workers' strikes, including the historic boycott against Coors Brewing Company, which was refusing to hire union labor and discriminating against LGBTQI plus workers. Harvey Milk's assassination in 1978, alongside San Francisco Mayor George Moscone, was a national tragedy, but Milk's life did not end with his death. His voice, his values, and his victories laid the groundwork for modern LGBTQIA plus rights and helped forge an intersectional path linking civil rights, human rights, and labor rights. Milk's message still echoes in our movements. Hope will never be silent. Today, as we look around, we see a world where LGBTQIA plus rights are still under attack through laws, through policies, through silence. But silence has never protected the marginalized. Action does, allyship does, solidarity does. So what now? Now is the time to step forward, not just in June, but every day. Now is the time to speak up, not just in our homes, but in our workplaces, our unions, our classrooms, our legislatures. Now is the time to become allies, not by name, but by action. Let's show the world that fighting for LGBTQIA rights is fighting for human rights. Let's remind our communities that there is no liberation for the few without justice for the many. Let's commit ourselves to building a world where dignity is not up for debate and where love, identity, and truth are not just tolerated, but celebrated. Be more than a bystander, be an ally, be a difference maker. In honoring Harvey Milk, we honor humankind. And in fighting for LGBTQIA plus rights, we uplift all of humanity. This has been our CWA, Our Power Human Rights Spotlight. Stay strong, stay union, stay human. You're listening to KYOK 1140 AM and the all new 106.5 FM. If you're on the go, you can take us with you by visiting kyokradio.org. Tune in every Thursday at 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific on kyokradio.org, the CWA Strong app, or your preferred podcast player, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, iHeartRadio, and Podchaser. Search for CWA Hour of Power on your favorite podcast player. Up next, we're going to be talking about congressional budget cut, who pays the price. And we have guests into the studio this morning, Elena Lopez and Tysianna Marino. Good morning. How are you guys doing?
Good morning. Good morning. Great to be here. Doing great.
Yeah. Thanks for having us. We're excited.
What was that, Reggie?
Welcome to our power. Hold on. Welcome to our power hour. I always get tangled up on that. Our CWA radio. Well, we bring the heat, the facts, and the fight for working people. I'm Timmia, joined by my dynamic co-hosts, Reginald and Errol. And today we're pulling the curtain back on something Congress don't want you to think too hard about. The so-called budget reconciliation package. They're calling it fiscal responsibility. We call it economic warfare on the working class. So let's be real. This bill isn't about reducing the deficit. It's about taking from the many and giving to the few. While the poorest 10% of households are expected to lose $1,600 a year, the richest 10% walk away with $12,000 more in their pockets. And let's not forget, the Congressional Budget Office says this bill will add 2.3 trillion to the deficit. That's a trillion with a capital T.
And how do they pay for it? Not by trimming corporate welfare, not by making the rich pay their fair share. No, they're slashing Medicaid, cutting food aid for children, gutting public education, and even threatening broadband funding if states try to regulate AI to protect workers. So let's dig in today. We're joined by two fierce fighters on the front lines, Elena Lopez and Ty Mariano. Let's get into it, guys. Are you all ready?
We're ready.
Oh, yeah, we're ready.
All right, here we go. Elena, let's start with the basics. How would you explain this budget bill to an everyday working person?
Yeah, thanks, Errol, for the question. And again, really happy to be here with my union brothers and sisters to talk about something that's really important and very timely. They're aiming to get this budget done by July 4th. So not a lot of time for folks to hop into action. But, I think that's what we're hoping to get people to do today. So I think plain and simple, right? When we think about this bill, we want to think of it as a cash grab by the rich, easy as it is, right? We see in this bill, it's cutting services like Medicaid and SNAP while rewarding wealthy corporations with tax breaks and more money. Working families are going to lose healthcare, food, housing help. Groceries are going to get more expensive, and life in general, costs are going to go through the roof. Also, billionaires can get a tax break and tax perks and continue to accumulate more and more wealth while the rest of us suffer. So, overall, when you think about this bill, who's the winner? The millionaires, the trillionaires, the billionaires, and not the working class.
Tysianna, thank you for that answer, Elena. Tysianna, we hear a lot about Medicaid in this field. What's at stake in your eyes? What do you think about that?
I think the short answer is everything. Everything is at stake. This is a really big piece of legislation. It's ironic that it has been coined one big beautiful bill because it is full of really ugly provisions like the ones that do impact Medicaid. If this bill is passed, millions of people, especially Black and brown people, and low income folks, will lose access to affordable health care. And so, we see this as a much broader issue. It's not just about coverage, it's about people's survival, right? And it's not just the people who are Medicaid recipients that are going to be impacted by the provisions, that will address Medicaid. It's also hurtful to frontline workers like nurses and aides who are already, facing burnout, who are already short-staffed, who are already up to their necks in work. When you cut things like Medicaid, the impacts of it, have a snowball effect. So to be honest with you, Timmia, everything is at stake.
Mm-hmm.
That makes me so sad.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yes.
Yes, go right ahead.
When we talk about Medicaid, right, I think there's this perception that Medicaid is people who just don't want to work, right? It is people who just want to collect money and live off the government. But when you look at the statistics, folks who are on Medicaid are often working, either some full-time, some part-time, folks in schools, children, or elderly who can't actually work, right? Because they're too old or too sick, right? And these are the folks who need Medicaid, right? It is not this cash grab that, the billionaires want you to think it is, right? They're the ones taking the money, the billionaires, not the folks who rely on Medicaid, who are just trying to make ends meet.
Mm-hmm.
That's so important that you said that. That needed to be
Yes.
said, and it needed to be heard, because people they paint the picture that it's for lazy people. That is only for the people who don't want to work. It's for the welfare queen. So thank you for pointing that out.
Exactly.
And Ty, you said something earlier. I didn't realize that this is what they were calling the big beautiful bill. I didn't realize that this is what it was.
Yes.
Wow.
Well, I think that we've been intentionally deceived, because if you look at certain news medias, it's saying, it's denying everything that we're talking about today. It's being denied to the mainstream. So if you're actually talking to someone, a neighbor or a family member, they say they're not cutting that, or that it won't impact that. And my first thought goes, of course, over to Medicaid and nursing homes. These are perhaps working people who have paid who have exhausted their savings, who've exhausted everything. And then in most cases, if you live long enough, you end up going through the Medicaid system to pay for nursing home care. I mean, that's going to impact nursing homes and hospitals in rural areas. It brings a great concern.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but uh, even when you start talking about Social Security, how it's an entitlement for individuals who have paid into. So I'll just stop right there. Elena, let's go back to this bill here. I'm sure with
Yeah.
everything that is going on, there's going to be a ripple effect to the states and to the local services. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. And I think we're kind of like touching on all that point, but I don't I don't think folks realize because it really didn't hit me until really doing work around this that Medicaid is a huge funder for state and local governments. So when we cut Medicaid, we are going to devastate state and
Mm-hmm.
local services. Many states rely on that funding because the federal government comes in, gives them that so they can provide for, sick kids, elderly, or as Reginald was saying, right, like folks in nursing homes. They rely on that. Then states have their other money to do stuff like, right, mental health programs. Let's fix our transportation systems, make our buses nicer, right? Public education. And guess what? When you cut Medicaid, you're cutting that funding that states are getting from the federal government. So they're going to have to start to look for cuts elsewhere. And we
Mm-hmm.
often know that it's not going to be Joe who owns the golf course down the street getting, his tax subsidies cut. No, it's going to be Black and brown communities. It's going to be, oh, we don't have any more after school programs. I'm sorry. Like your kid's just going to have to, make do at home. We're cutting, school hours, teachers' pay, things that our communities rely on are going to be
Mm-hmm.
devastated because we'll no longer have this source of funding. So it's much more than just like it's cutting Medicaid. Yes, that is a huge problem, but that means states' budgets are going to be decimated if this goes through.
So let's talk about jobs because you already kind of alluded to teachers being cut, et cetera, et cetera. Ty, what does this bill mean for working folks in manufacturing and call centers? Because I know that they're going to be affected as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, this bill, as we said earlier, is so full of stuff. And so there are provisions in here that address the tax code that actually hope to make a lot of the bad tax provisions that have been previously passed permanent. And these tax provisions essentially reward corporations who ship jobs overseas because they tax foreign profits at half the rate that they tax the domestic profits. So it's essentially a green light for layoffs, for plant closures, especially in communities where those jobs are already disappearing. And I want folks to really understand that the danger of this goes, yeah, it's already bad enough that people's jobs that we will face job loss if this legislation passes, but communities will feel the impacts of that job loss, not just the people who are losing those jobs, but, the local barbershop who depends on you having a job to pay for a haircut, the, grocery stores, the local restaurants, local community, especially small communities who depend on folks having money in their pockets to spend, to pour into their communities, will feel the impacts of this the most. And we know we think about manufacturing, when we think about call centers, we know that the folks that are employed in this are primarily folks of color. And they make up the vast majority of people in these industries. And so when we see job loss in these industries, it's really going to be impacting Black and brown folks if we're being honest about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It makes me think of myself as a working mother. Oh my goodness, single working mother. I came out of a call center. Having a union job is what made me be, it paved the way for me to be able to buy a home, to be able to afford tutoring for my child when she needed tutoring.
Mhm.
Um, I can't imagine being, I'm gonna digress. get off my
And I'm
soapbox.
thinking, and as Ty actually said that, I'm thinking the impact in rural communities. Once we're impacted in these rural communities, it will have no color. It won't just be
Mhm.
black and brown. The domino effect will impact the whole community.
Absolutely. And
So,
like Elena said earlier, these are tax breaks, so that the rich can be richer. These are corporations who are already some of them, right? Are multinational $1 million companies,
mhm,
that already make millions in profits, that are simply moving their profits, moving their operations overseas, so that they can rake in more profits for their stakeholders. And they're not raking in more profits so that they can employ more people domestically. They're not raking in more profits so that they can improve working conditions and pay people better wages and give people better health care. They're raking in these record profits, and they're giving it to the wealthiest people, to their shareholders, to their executive board members, to their CEO. And once again, working people are getting the short end of the stick. There are no
mhm,
tax provisions in here that make it so that, or the better way to say it is, this bill gives working people crumbs where it gives millionaires and billionaires literally the entire loaf. We think about the child tax credit, when we think about the earned income tax credit, things that really help working people, there are not these sweepingly beneficial provisions in the tax provisions in this bill that actually will do much to improve the livelihood of working people, and particularly families, people with
mhm,
kids, with
mhm,
moms that they care for. And so it's really disappointing to see the tax provisions written in the way that they have been.
mhm. Now, Ty, one
Well,
of the things that oh, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, go ahead, Errol.
One of the things that I noticed when I was reading over everything was that I've heard of food deserts, but then here you guys are talking about healthcare deserts. And I know just 45 minutes away from my home, or hour at best, that's our rural areas. And I know some of those areas down there already don't have hospitals.
Absolutely. That's right. That's right. Folks in these healthcare deserts, the closest hospital might be an hour and a half, 2 hour drive. And when you think about the threats to Medicaid, that makes it even more of a fearful thing, with the idea that even those facilities that are already so far out of reach could
Mhm.
possibly come further out of reach. It's inhumane when you think about it.
Hmm. Now, Lena, let's shift to AI, because I know some years ago at CWA we had a training on AI and what it would eventually lead to. So, what is the connection here with AI?
Well, AI is the hot new topic. I would say everyone loves talking about AI. We keep hearing how AI is going to revolutionize, the workplace and everything. But, what we're seeing in this bill is that they have a provision that essentially wants to strip broadband funding from states if they try to regulate AI. So this means that states and localities cannot protect workers when it comes to AI bias in training, hiring, practicing, housing, without risking internet access. It's essentially they're doing this game of blackmail. And I think CWA has been really leading in on kind of the AI discussion and regulation. Our members know, whether it's journalists, call centers, right, folks in broadcasting, we know what
Hmm.
AI is and we know how it's implemented in the workplace. And we know sometimes employers aren't, you know, doing the best with AI and it's affecting our jobs. And so we know how harmful it can be. And to say that states can't regulate AI for 10 years, that is, I would say, crazy, right? It's a bit
Hmm.
insane because we know that state level action is going to be critical for protecting workers and consumers. And we've had some good laws passed in the states. And to have those wiped away clean kind of leaves us defenseless.
Hmm. And I was talking to a political candidate the other day, and she was telling me that in Georgia, they are already putting broadband as a utility, and so it will be regulated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we know how I think COVID showed us, and as we kind of, come out of that, how important broadband is. And CWA fought hard along with many allies to get that broadband funding to make sure that there were good labor protections with it. And now to have that tied to this terrible provision and stripped, clean of what it is, it just will devastate communities that actually do really need broadband funding.
And go ahead, Timmia. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm just nodding. I'm the amen choir.
I think this is one of the hot topics that we must deal with, and that we've got to get it out to the community, because this is going to affect everybody. And not only will it affect everybody, but it is going to be hurting our marginalized people, marginalized communities. And my question is, how bad is it really going to get, Ty?
Yeah, the danger of not being able to regulate things is it could get very, very bad. We can go to the furthest depths. AI has been proven to reproduce racism, to be inherently biased, whether that's in facial recognition, whether that's in credit scoring, whether that's in hiring. And so when you restrict states' ability to regulate AI, it leaves particularly Black and brown folks, Black and brown communities wide open to harm without without any access to challenge it, to protect themselves. And so it's very, very bad.
So let's talk about children. How would this bill affect the children?
Not great. And I feel like we're kind of a broken record on that, right? But, again, in this one big, beautiful bill, as they call it, it guts SNAP, which means that up to 4 million children could lose food assistance. And again, these are children. It phases out the child tax credits and reduces funding for public schools while giving more to private vouchers. When you want to go to your local public school, support the community, right? That school might not be there anymore. You might have to send your kid to private school, which costs a lot of money. Sure, you might get a voucher, but it still costs money. Essentially, this is an attack on poor kids. And again, these are children, right? Like, who have done nothing with their life, but just try to grow up, right? And try to live, and we're taking away food assistance from them, which is just truly devastating.
It's horrible. It's barbaric.
So are you telling me that when I think about this, my mother, born in 1949, tells us of how they in the 50s went to bed hungry with perhaps no hope for a good dinner even the next day. Are you telling me that in 2025, this bill is looking at literally taking bread out of the mouths of children, and that we could have a situation where children are not able to have a proper meal each day? Is that what you're telling me?
That is exactly what I'm telling you, that kids will go hungry. And I think, as you've heard kind of through all the other bad stuff in this bill, like, there might not be community aid, whether it's nonprofits, to step up and take the place. So kids will go hungry. And I think, as Ty can get into, in a bit, but like, right, a hungry child is not going to be able to concentrate in school and do well, right? This is just devastating effects that it will have on this child's life.
And to your point, Reginald, a lot of folks depend on, or, a lot of kids depend on school to be a place where they can for sure get at least one good meal, possibly two if they do breakfast and lunch. And the interesting thing that especially about, what Elena said about the vouchers is, as we see a trend towards vouchers, and that's pulling funding from public education, that's really dangerous, especially to Black and brown folks, to low income folks, because charter schools are not required to accept anyone. You know, they function
Mm.
as private schools and they use public funds. They are not required to take anyone. So you can have a voucher and there can be a charter school a block away from your house, and your kid literally will not be able to go there if they tell you that they can't. And another thing is, because charter schools function more like private schools than they do public schools, they also don't have to guarantee kids a meal. You know, they don't have to guarantee that your child can have at least one meal for sure. So if we're taking SNAP out of, you know, out of the homes and quite literally bread off of the table for kids, and we're also not giving them access to proper nutrition at school, where does that leave kids but vulnerable?
And Ty, I just want to jump in because charter schools they get me. You want to even talk about how they really don't have to have qualified educators in the classrooms.
They make their own rules.
They make their own rules and they're using public tax dollars.
Yeah.
And if a student is put into a charter school and they become disruptive or they become suspended, the tax dollars, they suspend the student, the tax dollars stay with the charter school, and then the public school system has to make do without even getting any assistance. In other words, what I'm saying, the money doesn't follow the child.
Definitely not. It doesn't. And, you know, and when we think about that, that's lost not only just from the public school itself, that's from the public school system as a whole. So buses, you know, bus operations, things like that are also impacted. I don't think people
Mm-hmm.
understand the broad impact of some of these provisions. So when we say a snowball effect, we literally mean it.
It is really a snowball effect with everything because I just thought about this. I want to bring this out. While we are sending public tax dollars to charter schools can open and close a number of times.
Mhm.
Start up under one name, close, open up under
Mhm.
another name, and still get more money.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no regulation with it.
They do it all the time.
Yes, all of the time.
It's another
Um,
another form, it's another form of statistic racism that's essentially baked into budget policy.
Yes, yes. And another thing, Elena, I want to go back and I want to clarify and confirm something because I don't think the public is really getting this. I don't even think our union members are really getting this right here. Did you say that the SNAP program, they were just going to take a few dollars off, but still send money to children in need? Or are you saying that they're going to just gut the whole thing?
So it would gut part part of the program. So not all of
Hmm.
it, but they would make significant cuts that would amount to about, folks have crunched the numbers, 4 million children losing food assistance.
Hmm.
And they've
Yeah.
already
And
made cuts. Go ahead, I'm sorry. So that's cuts on top of cuts, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah,
yes,
we know historically, right, when they want to fix the budget, clean up the budget, it is often to the assistance program like Medicaid, SNAP. So we're just further chopping it.
I just don't get it. And how can you see
You
a
and me both.
child go hungry?
You don't get it because you have ethics.
Well,
And
thank you. I appreciate it.
And
and
they are
what
the future of our country.
yeah, and what concerns me when we say we don't get it, we're not getting it because we're living in a well, I get it, and I know you're using a figure of speech, but we're living in a time whether you either believe these or you believe us or you believe them. And so there's no really reference to what is the real deal or how can we actually educate our people? Where can they go and read this information for themselves? It's so
Mhm.
unbelievable that the average person thinks, oh, well, it really won't impact me. But it will. It will.
Yeah.
It'll impact you if you have perhaps an elderly parent that wants to have in-house care, and there are Medicaid programs that actually help with that. It will impact you because the cost of living is so high in our communities now. Even in states where cost of living used to not be so high, the rent is high, the mortgages are higher, the interest rates are higher. You have less money that can be put towards food. It's the impact is so significant right now that it's beyond even expressing in a 1 hour radio show. That's how serious this is. And
Yeah.
we must find a way to communicate to people the impact, to help people be able to make decisions, to have open conversations. And it's not just them and us. We need a way to disseminate facts and disseminate the truth, and so that people can understand what's coming their way. It's like a tornado warning. We need the sirens to go off so that we can take cover, so that we know what's coming.
Need a good
Amen.
roundtable discussion.
Well, and I think you find that, right, they're trying to move this process so fast so that people don't have time to pay attention, right? Like, why are you going to pay attention to what's happening in Congress when you got, money to make, mouths to feed, things to do in your day-to-day life? You're not going to pay attention. And so they're hoping that they can tap, go up on that and, get this done within a month. And you find the research shows that, like, when you actually start talking to people about all of this, and we're not even like halfway through the bad stuff in this bill, right? Like, people don't like it. It's just no one has the time to pay attention to it because they're moving it so fast, and everyone has to make a living out here.
Right.
And what about clean energy? Is anything being addressed in clean energy with this bill?
Yeah, they're cutting all the investments that we had made in the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act that passed in the last administration. These were bipartisan proposals. So it's ending credits for electric vehicles and home efficiencies. And that's going to mean, right, higher utility bills, fewer clean energy jobs, some of which that belong to CWA members, right? It's going to hurt renters and low-income households who are already struggling with costs. So again, right, things that are helping people are going to be cut.
Yes. And people eventually, I hope they will realize this before it's too late. You've got to go down this road one day as well. These things are going to affect you just because you're making good money right now. One day you may have to depend on your Medicaid or Medicare. One of these days you are. So let's talk about these big cuts. What's behind these? What's the goal behind these cuts, Ty?
The way that it can even be imagined to pay for these big cuts is through tax breaks for the rich. This is a funding grab for more tax breaks for the rich. That's it. The bill slashes basic programs. It auctions off public airways, all to give billionaires a windfall. And we are expected to make up, working people are expected to make up the difference. And so when we talk about Medicaid, when we talk about SNAP, when we talk about all of these cuts, they're happening because our government right now is focusing on how to enrich their rich friends. And so unfortunately, the burden of those breaks, the burden of the money that they're giving away is falling on people who are already burdened, who are already suffering, just by way of minimum wage barely being enough, of a living wage constantly being debated, of inflation constantly being on the rise. There are already so many factors that are impacting the strain that people feel. I don't think the average working person would say they feel, just extremely comfortable financially right now, and so I think that when we think about the continuing to talk about this snowball impact, that's the outcome of these tax breaks that rich people are getting up front, is that somebody's got to pay for them, and it's probably not even probably, it's going to be us.
So it sounds like the economic inequality is getting worse.
Absolutely. It widens every single day. Race, wealth, health, education, those we already face so much inequality within those categories. And so, the few tools that poor people have at their disposal, healthcare, food, child credits, things that really help them and make a difference. The tax provisions that we have, the earned income tax literally lifts millions of children out of poverty. We should be strengthening those provisions. We should be making those kinds of things stronger because that helps vastly more people than these few millionaires and billionaires. And so it's really unfortunate that in order to compensate for all this money that we're ensuring the wealthiest of people get, on the opposite end of that, working people get nothing but more debt, more instability, which is further and further away from, the vision of the American dream that we've all been bought into. It's supposed to be that if we work hard, one job should be enough for us to pay the bills and keep our families fed and afford health care and, have transportation and all these essential things that are essential to life. And we find that more and more working people are having to work 2 and 3 jobs to keep the lights on. And I think that's absolutely deplorable that we live in a country where that can be the reality while there are people who make millions of dollars a day.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely correct. And I was wondering why my phone just kept ringing or kept buzzing but I have people texting me listening to the show, and they are in agreement with you all left and right. You hear me? So we want to thank Patricia for tuning in this morning, and because she is hot in on my text message, talking about everything that's going on. Ty and Elena, I want your final thoughts. What do you want our listeners to do?
All right. Well, this is the time, y'all. It is time to get activated and actually do some work. We need you to call your senators. We need you to share the facts. This isn't about politics. It's not about what side of the aisle that you are on. It is about people. You need to demand that the Senate, your senators, vote no on this budget. You can also write a letter to your senators. We've set up a helpful tool at cwa.org/budget. That is cwa.org/budget, where you can write to your senators and tell them to vote no on this budget.
And, I would add to that by saying, folks, get out there and organize. Get out there and organize, educate your neighbors, educate, your family members, your friends. Make sure everybody has this information because we don't want people not moving because they didn't know. We are union siblings here. And so we want to stand with our union. We know a lot about solidarity. It is built into who we are. This bill is beatable, but only if we fight back. Only if we fight back. If we sit on our hands and we wait for it to fail, it will not. We have to make sure we're getting out there and ensuring this does not go any further than it already has. And, that we draw the line here. And the only way we can do that is through action, through collective action. And so, that's the importance of, ensuring that we're getting the word out, ensuring that we're not just getting the word out, but moving. So to Elena's point, let's organize and let's make sure they hear us. Let's make sure we're making those calls.
Yes. So you heard it. This is about our power, our future, and our survival. This bill doesn't just hurt, it targets the working class, especially Black, brown, rural, and low income families. So get loud, get organized, and remember, when we fight, we win. Thank you so much, guys, for coming to CWA Our Power this morning. Elena, Ty, we must have you back at a later date and time to continue this discussion. You're listening to
Thanks for
KYOK
having me.
1140. Yes, you're listening to KYOK 1140 AM and the all new 106.5 FM. If you're on the go, you can take us with you by visiting kyokradio.org. Tune in every Thursday, 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific on KYOK Radio, kyokradio.org, the CWA Strong app, or your preferred podcast player. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, iHeartRadio, and Podchaser. Search for the CWA Hour of Power on your favorite podcast player. Up next, we're going to be talking about right to work or wrong for workers, how our states are being sold out and sold short.
To our Power Radio Show, where labor meets truth and community meets courage. I am Reginald Small. Timmia and Errol are here to join me today to discuss a topic that affects every working family, every paycheck, and every job site from Alabama to Ohio. It's called right to work. But we're asking, is it really right, or is it just wrong for workers? Now, we know some folks hear right to work, and it sounds good. It sounds like freedom. It sounds like choice. But we're going to break it down today, not with fear, but with some facts.
Right to work laws make it illegal for unions and employers to agree that everyone who benefits from a union contract pays their fair share in dues or fees. So imagine this. Your union fights for raises, safety rules, health care, and someone else gets all that without paying a dime. That's not freedom. That, my friends, is freeloading.
And my good friends, I must tell you, these laws don't guarantee you a job. They don't protect your job. They don't raise your wages. What they do is protect the boss, and I hate that word. They protect the boss from having to deal with a strong, united force.
Exactly, Errol. And when the unions get weaker, the contracts actually get thinner, the protections go missing, and guess who wins? Not the people clocking in.
No, let's tell the truth, y'all. These laws don't come from a pure place. After World War II, the Taft-Hartley Act rolled back workers' rights, and it's especially targeted Black, immigrant, and poor white workers who were organizing together.
In the South, right?
Of course.
States, and what happened, and many people, they're not going to even look into it. They're not going to do the history because they're not concerned about that. They only go off of the talking points that they hear on the news or social medias. But in the South, what happened was the states rushed to pass the laws, not just to weaken the unions, but to preserve segregation and divide the workers. And the message was just as clear: keep workers scared, divided, and underpaid.
Right to work laws have always been about control and power, control the labor force, control the politics, and make sure that folks who run things don't have to deal with organized resistance.
So what's the result? Here is the result from the cost of being a right to work state. Are you guys ready for this? You have lower wages, less health care. We just got through talking about that. Fewer job protections. And in fact, workers in right to work states make about $1,500 to $2,000 less per year.
And that ain't all. That ain't all. And I know that's not proper for the radio, but that ain't all. These states have higher workplace death, weaker pensions, and fewer benefits. Why? Because the union doesn't have the power or resources to enforce protections.
And so let's make this plainer. The same states pushing these laws the hardest are the ones with the most people receiving federal aid. That's not a judgment, definitely not a judgment. That's just a reality. You weaken wages and jobs, you increase dependence. Then you turn around and blame the people struggling the most.
Of course. Right. But here's where it gets hard, but real. A lot of folks voting for these anti-worker laws, they're working people. Folks like us, people with calluses on their hands, bills on their table, pride in their roots.
Baby, I got so many bills on this table this morning.
What you talking about, Willis?
I'm about to find them like Fred G. Sanford in the container.
What you talking
about? They've been sold a bill of goods, told that the union is corrupt, or that freedom means going at it alone. Told by the government it's the problem. even when they depend on the same government to keep the lights on and the kids fed.
Let's be real about this. Some of it's racial, some of it's fear, and a whole lot of it is propaganda, which is very popular these days, cooked up by billionaires who've never worked a 12-hour shift in 90-degree heat.
All right, y'all, let's look at some numbers. Can I get a drum roll, please? States like Mississippi, Alabama, West Virginia, all right to work states, taking more federal dollars than they pay in taxes.
Say it one more time, please, for the people in the back.
States like Mississippi, Alabama, West Virginia, all right to work states, taking more federal dollars than they pay in taxes.
You're absolutely right. While they're preaching independence, and this is what burns me up, while they're preaching independence, they're cashing checks. Meanwhile, union-heavy states like New York and California are putting more money into the federal pot than they take out. So who are the welfare queens? Come on, y'all, help me out here this morning.
Errol, here's the kicker. The people pushing right to work, they fight against Medicaid, education funding, they fight against food stamps, all the while collecting farm subsidies, corporate bailouts, and tax breaks.
Let's talk about it. Michigan just repealed its right to work law. There, people are waking up to this scam. Michigan, y'all doing your big thing. What the kids say? They did their big one. People are organizing again. It doesn't have to stay this way.
And I think we're going to have to get a copy of that bill for some of these other states. But we also must realize that the PRO Act at the federal level could fix this nationwide, but it needs pressure from all of us. And that means organizing, voting smart, and talking to our neighbors. We've got to have those round table conversations.
And to be clear, absolutely crystal clear, clean, crystal clear, this isn't about party. This is about paycheck. It's about dignity. It's about not letting some suit 500 miles away decide your family's future while they get richer off of your silence.
So, hear me out. Y'all hear me out. Hear my heart. If you have been told that the union's your enemy, look again. If you have been told right to work means freedom, ask yourself, whose freedom?
And really, it's time to stop being tricked into voting against our own jobs, our own health care, our own families. Whether you wear a hard hat, scrubs, a badge, or boots, we are the labor force.
You've been listening to the Our Power radio show. Join a union, support a union worker, talk to your co-workers, ask questions. Here's the deal. Please ask questions. And remember that an injury to one is an injury to all.
You're absolutely correct.
Amen. Amen. Today has been, ooh, child. When I tell you today's been a show.
And you have been listening. You have indeed been listening to the CWA Our Power radio show, where we don't just talk about power, we remind you that you are the power.
Well, all right then, Mr. Reginald. Well, we got to we're at the close, but one thing we've got to get in today is the Union Buster of the Week. Are you ready for your Union Buster of the Week, Timmia?
Now, do we have time to talk about New Mexico? We got 6 minutes left. Do we have time?
Go right ahead.
All right, we're going to talk about New Mexico Department of Health endangering lives, ignoring workers, and violating OSHA. This week's Union Buster of the Week. The spotlight shines on the New Mexico Department of Health for a reckless disregard of worker safety. Union voices that put hundreds of public employees in harm's way. In early May, over a dozen union workers reported a dangerous gas smell in their Albuquerque building, home to 250 workers providing critical public health services. But the New Mexico Department of Health management refused to investigate. dismissing their concerns outright and telling employees a gas leak was impossible. It took the courage of anonymous CWA Local 7076 member calling the New Mexico Gas Company directly to uncover the truth. 6 out of 10 furnaces, 6 out of 10, that's quite a large number, were leaking gas, forcing a 4-day shutdown. Even then, management refused transparency, lying, telling untruths to workers that the closure was due to rooftop repairs, deliberately downplaying the hazard to protect their image rather than protect lives. Adding insult to injury, weeks before, workers were exposed to toxic chemicals after a maintenance mishap, causing symptoms like nausea and vomiting. When workers demanded safer procedures, the New Mexico Department of Health ignored them. Imagine that. To make matters worse, when reporting to OSHA, they withheld critical information and did not interview a single injured employee. Violating both federal safety regulations and the basic ethical duty to protect workers. This is more than negligence. It's a deliberate tactic to silence workers and weaken union power by ignoring their safety concerns. Public health agencies must be held to the highest safety standards, especially with the health and safety of their employees and the community are on the line. This is why executive orders must stop gutting worker protections by way of OSHA. When safety enforcement is weakened, workers suffer and management gets away with putting lives at risk. We call on the Cabinet Secretary, Gina de Blasi, an elected official, to step up, listen to CWA Local 7076 members, and commit to a real plan that prioritizes worker safety and respect union voices, because unions are the frontline defenders of safe worker places. When management gaslights and ignores workers, it's the union that exposes the truth and fights for justice. We all deserve a workplace free from hazards, and that starts with respecting the voices of people who show up every day to do the work. This has been your Union Buster of the Week. You are listening to KYOK 1140 AM and the all-new 106 FM. If you're on the go, you can take us with you by visiting kyokradio.org.
Thank you so much. And as we come down to the final minutes of the show, CWA Human Rights Relief Drive is still going on for St. Louis tornado response. We're still collecting urgently needed items to support families affected by the recent tornadoes in St. Louis. You may send your donations to CWA Local 6300 2258 Grissom Drive, St. Louis, Missouri, 63146. Let me repeat that one more time. CWA Local 6300 2258 Grissom Drive, St. Louis, Missouri, 63146. Toiletries, feminine hygiene products, diapers, and baby wipes are needed. These essential items are often overlooked in disaster relief, so let's show our union strength and community support. A local contact will be President Floyd Bell at 314-991-0200. Our union brothers, sisters, and siblings at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette have been outside for 32 months on the picket lines, and yet while they're striking, they are still churning out the news with facts for you and me. Let's show our support to them by making sure we subscribe to unionprogress.com. Once you subscribe to this free publication, how about going over and donating to their strike fund at cwa.org/PPG-donate. Take action and learn more today. When you take time to learn about others around you, you're making the world a better place. Awareness campaigns serve as a powerful reminder that there are steps we all must take in looking out for loved ones, the people in our community, and those who have been impacted. It's time to take one big step together and make a change. If you want more information regarding the congressional budget cuts, you may go to cwa.org/budget. Thanks to our guests this morning, Ty and Elena. An hour is not long enough to be with you, and a week is too long to be away from you. You have been tuned into the CWA Human Rights Hour Power broadcast. I hope something you heard today has inspired you to take action toward creating positive change in the world. Every person has the power to make a difference, no matter how small, and by working together, we can create a world where human rights are respected and valued. So I encourage each of you in the listening audience to reflect on your role in promoting human rights to effect change in your communities and beyond. Know that you are not alone in your quest for a more just and equitable world. When faced with injustice, it can be easy to lose hope and give up. But remember, justice may be slow like the truth, but when it finally comes, it will stand. Until next Thursday, 10 a.m. Central, right here on KYOK 1140 AM and the all-new 106.5 FM KYOK radio.org. See you next week.